Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome back. So, Dark and Darker. This is the game that in a lot of ways marked the kickoff to the recent surge in non-FPS extraction titles we've seen over these past couple of years. If you don't recall, this is the action combat fantasy RPG extraction game that has you dungeon diving in search of loot while fending off all sorts of fantasy creatures and also dealing with the constant threat of hostile players. Go in, fight, collect valuables, try to escape alive, and that's pretty much the gist of it. Now, I initially covered this game when it was first available for testing back in December 2022. In the years since, a whole lot has happened. The game finally made its way back onto Steam last June, and in the subsequent months has received numerous updates to the point where it's quite different from what it was when I initially played it a little over 2 years ago. So in today's video, sponsored by Iron Mace, I'm going to be giving you an updated look at Dark and Darker, going over the core fundamentals of what the game is, how it plays, along with checking out some of what is new and different from the last time around, the last time we saw it and covered it here on the channel. So, alright, let's go ahead and dive in and check out Dark and Darker. Now, as mentioned, this at its core is an extraction game, but rather than being a first-person shooter like the genre's best-known origins of Tarkov, this is a first-person action game in a fantasy setting of swords and sorcery. One of the things I initially really liked about Dark and Darker is how it delivers on the whole dungeon diving experience. Like, it does a great job of creating the sense of going on an adventure, exploring through a dark dungeon full of surprises, traps, deadly creatures, and other players who also happen to be quite deadly. Most of the time anyways. Sometimes you'll just watch them crouch spam, kind of funny looking, or running by giving you a thumbs up, also quite funny. The core loop of the game works something like this. You'll drop into a map somewhere on its parameter, then as you move from one room to the next, you'll be killing enemy NPCs, collecting any loot they drop, along with scavenging around for crates and treasure chests for more items, and then after a few minutes, extraction points will open up in multiple locations. With your inventory full, you then walk out easy peasy, piece of cake, you fill your coffers, and you run again. Simple as that, no problems, right? Well, nope, not exactly, not quite. Getting in the way of this breezy scenario is death. Lots and lots of death, which comes in many forms. For starters, even the most basic enemies in this game can be a massive obstacle, quickly depleting your health if not properly engaged. And I mean that literally, like even the starting, basic, slow-moving skeletons can kill you in a few hits. The game really puts a large emphasis on your positioning, distance, and knowing when and how to strike. When you first get started, this will require taking it easy and observing. How does an enemy attack? Is it a forward stab, an overhead slam, a horizontal slash? Is there one strike or two? So on and so on and so on. And this rings true for every single enemy in the game, of which there are quite a few. You've got several varieties of skeletons with melee, ranged, and caster variants. There's a whole host of wildlife, including things like wolves, spiders, bats, and mosquitoes. And then there are ghosts, zombies, elementals, golems, werewolves, goblins, the list goes on and on. In addition to all of those basic varieties, every single map also has numerous elite enemies as well as these unique bosses, each with their very own particular attack cadence, patterns, and skills for you to memorize. Pretty much all of that you will eventually want to learn, because getting hit by anything at any point is bad for your health. In fact, in most cases, it really only takes a few slip-ups for you to be hit one too many times and subsequently die. Now, as with anything, the more you play, the more you learn, and the better you'll get. Eventually, you will learn and figure out exactly how every enemy attacks, which, coupled with the knowledge of the attack patterns for your class and weapons, makes combat feel like this satisfying dance. You walk up to an enemy, in most cases you will either then be strafing, backing up, or ducking to avoid their first attack, and then countering that with one or two hits yourself, rinse and repeat. In fact, if you watch seasoned players play this game, they really make the PvE combat look like a total cakewalk, but it only appears that way because they have learned all of the tricks and positioning required after playing for a long time. When you first start out yourself, it will not be quite this simple, although one easy trick I can tell you is you want to try to bait attacks whenever possible, basically walking just within swing range and then moving either back or to the side to avoid their strike, and then countering once they're in recovery. The game is littered with these enemy NPCs, by the way. Pretty much every single room on every map is loaded with a predetermined mix, something that you will also learn with time, exactly which enemies are placed where in every room on every map. And I will add here as well that as you continue to progress playing through the game, you'll not even want or need to fight every one of these, instead clearing only what is necessary to, say, loot a valuable chest or to prepare for an upcoming PvP fight. But otherwise, later on, you're going to often find yourself running past enemies, dodging them to get to the next room, and then closing the door. That often becomes the play. It all just really depends on what you're trying to do in any given match or at any given moment. But yeah, maybe early on you're fighting and clearing every single enemy that you aggro, and this is part of the learning process as you figure out their attacks and when and how to strike back. But eventually you're going to be skipping a lot and only fighting what is necessary, whether it's because you're running from PvP, running towards PvP, or you're only wanting to kill enemies that let you loot a very valuable chest or let you engage an elite or a boss with very valuable loot. Eventually you won't be fighting absolutely everything, or at least that's I guess what we would consider suboptimal play. So beyond exploring the dungeon and fighting these enemies along with collecting loot, as mentioned, the other big element of this game is player versus player. Every single match you are thrown into a lobby with a handful of other people, and in most cases, if you see one of them, there's gonna be a fight. Very rarely is that not the case, unless someone's memeing around, like you'll see them crouching really fast up and down, or giving you the thumbs up or whatever to let you know, like, hey, I'm doing something else, or I don't really want to fight. Now, sometimes you can use that as an opportunity to attack them if you want to be that guy. Other times they're faking and then they're going to attack you when they get close. So it's a PvP game. There's going to be PvP, expect PvP, but sometimes for the lulls, there isn't PvP. So currently the game offers solo, duo, and trio queues. As for myself, I have mostly done solo and some duo, and I gotta say, in both experiences, I've really enjoyed the PvP. I mean, of course, you could argue it is the primary draw for a game like this, and I'll add that PvP, quite challenging, no doubt about it. It took me a while to get my bearings, even having played the game quite substantially a couple of years ago. It still took a while to get back into things, to get reacclimated. There's not only multiple classes for you to learn, either from the perspective of playing them or fighting against them, but then there's also many different weapon types as well as potential active and passive ability combos for each of those classes, all of which you will slowly pick up the more fights you get in, what classes are easy for you, which ones are harder, or even matchups that are nearly impossible. Like, so for example, right now I've been mostly playing a medium and light armor dual wielding Slayer warrior. Quite good in a lot of 1v1 matchups, except for one primary thing being heavy armor wearers. Anyone that has like a ton of physical damage reduction is really hard for my current build to deal with. Not impossible though, as my class is fairly quick, especially with the sprint skill, and I am using a heavy bow, so basically my goal is to try to whittle them down before getting into melee range. But regardless, this is a class and gear-based PvP game with combat that for me is a bit reminiscent of Chivalry, in the sense that a lot of the skill here comes down to knowing the attack patterns as well as the potential of the different weapons your opponents are using, and then positioning and spacing to dodge those attacks, countering when the player is in recovery. It's a lot like the PvE, but just a lot more dynamic because you're playing a person instead of like pre-established scripted AI that always begins with the same first attack, right? A little more unpredictable, the PvP players, but you got to learn their attack patterns and the potential for each of the classes and each of the weapons, and then go into that fight with that in mind, engaging only when it's safe or relatively safe. And that, coupled with knowing whatever spells or abilities those different classes have, especially the caster classes, and how to maneuver against those without taking too much damage. The whole thing is very skill and very knowledge based. It's, again, once more, just something that takes time. Get some fights under your belt. You are going to die, but you will be learning in the process. Now, the other big thing worth mentioning are the countless environmental hazards, because while engaged in PvP, you're going to need to avoid drawing aggro from PvE enemies as much as possible, which is easier said than done, because as aforementioned, every single room is pretty much jam-packed with PvE enemies, and if you accidentally aggro one of the more dangerous ones while you're in the middle of a PvP fight, well, that's just one more thing for you to contend with in addition to the player. But then also, there's a fairly wide variety of traps and damage-dealing obstacles that are scattered around the maps. You got things like rocks and ice shards that can fall from the ceiling, or spike traps, as well as swinging axe pendulums that will damage you if you get within their range, or even poison clouds that roam the halls from the zombies that shamble around, and plenty more. Yeah, as mentioned, while the objective of this game is simple, load into a map, collect the loot, get out alive, it's executing that amongst all of the dangers that makes everything quite challenging. Okay, so when I played the game last, there were 6 classes to choose from. Those were the fighter, the barbarian, the rogue, the ranger, the wizard, and the cleric. Each of these do basically what they sound like they do. Since then, then 4 additional classes have been added. Now we've also got the Bard, who plays music, granting buffs, really good at CC and melee, but quite loud, giving away your position. There's the Warlock, all about dark magic, cast powerful curses, but at the expense of their life. You got the Druid, who's a shapeshifter with nature magic and healing, and then the Sorcerer, who has strong elemental magic with long cooldowns. So you're going to pick the class that you want depending on the style or role that you feel like playing, and then from there you're going to choose from a list of multiple active abilities which ones you want to use, as you can't have every single one of them. And that is why, once more, in the PvP, you're going to have to learn the wide array of potential combinations, because not every Bard is going to be exactly the same. Not any of the classes are going to be exactly the same, depending on the actives, but also the passives that they choose from, because then you have these passive perk slots. These are buffs that will enhance the character's attacks, abilities, and spells. Every class can equip 4 of these that they want active at a time from a much larger list of roughly 9 to 10 potential passives per class. Now, in my recent revisit, I started out playing as a ranger, going with a bow build, and then crossbow using spears, and then eventually I swapped over to the class I'm currently playing, the fighter, which, as stated earlier, I'm focused on kind of being really fast, dual-wielding Slayer playstyle. I like it a lot. I am interested in trying some of the caster classes. They do seem quite powerful, but also much more skill and knowledge intensive. Mostly been my hesitancy to jumping into them as of this point. So as for the maps, these have also changed significantly from when I last played. They're pretty much completely different, in fact, from what I recall. Although there are some similar rooms that were used in the earlier build, a lot of them are here as well. There's also a lot of new stuff, and the overall structure and layout and presentation of these maps feel pretty much brand new from what I recall. So first, there's the Goblin Caves, which is a nice starter map. It's smaller in scale than the others and kind of more simple to digest. As the name implies, this one is full of goblins in addition to some of the other baseline creatures. And then the other gimmick here is that the cave is slowly collapsing as time progresses, and you need to get out before the ceiling entirely caves in when the clock strikes 0. So for extraction, beyond the portals that you can escape or the stairs, there's also numerous ropes that you can grab, which will slowly lift you out. The next map, Frost Mountain, consists of caverns and ruins all covered in ice. You've got lots of ice-themed and enhanced enemies here. Again, beyond the staircases and portals, its themed extraction mechanic is this water raft that you can jump on, carrying you out on a stream. And then finally, the Ruins of the Forgotten Castle. This is currently my favorite map. It's ancient ruins, carries over a lot from what the original map had, but I think coolest of all is that currently it's the only map with multiple floors that you can descend lower for increased challenges and rewards. So on the top level, you've got these standard blue extraction portals and stairs, but then also multiple staircases that are red, which will take you 1 level lower. The first floor is outside. You got open air above you. This is mostly a mix of basic skeletons, wisp, and gargoyles with some few more things mixed in, but it's above ground, it's up in the sky. And then the second floor takes you to a more traditional dungeon crawler, which is a lot of the rooms and structure that I recall from the 2022 version that I played. And then finally, the third floor, you can descend an additional level from floors 2 to 3, and that is going to take you to this all red bloody region, which consists of the game's most difficult enemy types, but again, results in some of the best potential gear. Now, also as an interesting twist is that when you move down a floor, it actually puts you into a new lobby of players who also move down from the first floor to the second floor. And this is different from the original lobby that you played with up at the higher level. So you're basically going to be constantly running into new players, even if you cleared everyone that was on the first floor in this map. Maps have 2 variations with normal and high roller, as well as 2 gear score ranges and 3 different team sizes, those being the solo, duo, and trio. So quite a lot of different hoppers here, depending on how you want to play, the kind of experience that you want. I'll say personally, I've really enjoyed solo and duo with a low gear score. It just seems like a great way to learn, and really no stakes here, like non-existent, especially with the inclusion of the Squire, which is one of my favorite additions from the last time that I played. So this is an NPC that lets you select a predetermined loadout for your character, which you'll be automatically equipped with anytime you die. So this is going to give you a choice of various types of starting, which is gray and white low-level gear. And when you first begin playing, you're not going to have much to pick from, but as you progress and complete quest for the game's numerous vendors, you will unlock additional weapons, armor, and consumables that you can use at the Squire. And I just love this because it eliminates any need to fiddle around with equipping your character every time you die, which was previously the case. When I died in the past, I'd have to go in and either select from my stash of stuff that I had stored or purchase new stuff from the different vendors to re-equip my character, putting on all the gear pieces, the weapons that I wanted, and all the consumables that I wanted. every single time after every single match. The Squire eliminates that. You just select your predetermined loadout. When you die, you're automatically going to get re-equipped with it, which means you can just instantly hit go again and load straight into another match. Takes away a lot of the pain in between matches and a lot of the annoyance from dying if you can just go right away again. No stakes at all. And I really, really like it. So outside of the Squire, there are 12 additional merchants in the game who sell an assortment of items on a rotating stock, some of whom will buy any gear or treasures that you want to sell, giving you gold in return so you can buy the stuff you do need. And then, as mentioned, they've also got a series of quests for you, asking you to complete some objective, all the usual stuff. They'll say, hey, visit this location on this map, or kill these particular enemies, or bring me this item. Doing these will give you loot and currency, but also, in many cases, unlocks more items for you to potentially load into your Squire loadout. A couple of other mechanics and features worth noting. They've got leaderboards here with rankings for all the different game modes and team sizes. There's player trading. Now, this is locked behind the $30 legendary upgrade. However, the game is otherwise free to play, so this is just like if you want to get player trading, this is a nice benefit from it, in addition to additional character slots and increased experience. Player trading lets you do what it sounds like. You can trade items with other players directly. The Gathering Hall is a group finder separated per region, and then lastly you get some customization with things like lobby backgrounds, skins for your characters and items, along with emotes, all of which can be purchased in the cash shop. Again, once more, it's a baseline free-to-play game. Now, the most recent update, which came mid-December with the launch of season number 5, with this, beyond resetting character progression, they made some changes to make the dungeon runs less stagnant, with the first iteration of random dungeon system starting with the crypts. So this is that lower level beyond the first level of the ruins. Now they plan to expand this into more dungeon biomes with random generation throughout the season, so we'll be getting additional lower levels of dungeons in the future. They implemented a continuous matchmaking system, so players, rather than waiting for filling up a lobby after every run, you can instantly jump straight into a new match immediately. It will be in progress, although in my experience, it'll be at most a few minutes in, but not much more. I've never joined a match that only had like 4 minutes left. I guess that's what I would say. Usually it's at least within the first half of the match, giving you some time to do some stuff before you extract. In most cases, it's within the first couple of minutes, if not immediately at the beginning of the match. Again, just my experience. They also added that brand new sorcerer class. They added a item socket feature for further gear customization, a new achievement system. They updated the questing system, making it synchronized across all characters on your account. And they've also launched the inaugural season of the game's arena with its own leaderboards as well. And that pretty much does it for our updated look at Dark and Darker. As you can see, the game has gotten quite a few updates since the last time we gave it a look. It's in many ways just so much more new things between the new classes, the new presentation of the dungeon system, the new mechanics and features, the new different extraction points, and in particular, one of my favorite things, the addition of that Squire. Absolutely love it. Nice to see it continuing to evolve and get supported with time. If you'd like to learn more and check out the game for yourself, link is available below. Thanks once again to Iron Mace for sponsoring this video. Thank you as always for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.